Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the November 30th, 2023 special board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. And I got to turn myself on here.
Your mic's not on. Your mic.
It's on. Is it not working? Oh, got to get closer. Okay, I'll do it again. Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 30th, 2023 special board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 1:31 p.m. and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territory of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. I'm trying.
System is what it is.
Yeah, it's what it is. If someone could ask them to be a little quieter outside, it might help. Okay. As our CAO mentioned, this is a board meeting. All presentations are made to the board of directors. That's what the meeting is for. It's not a public engagement meeting. You're welcome to listen, and at the discretion of the chair, we will ask for questions at the end. We've decided that we will ask questions at the end of the first presentation, though, rather than make you wait till the board meeting is over, which is our normal procedure. So the first item of business, directors, we have an amended agenda before us. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Yes, Director Back, seconded. Director Gabius, all in favor? That passes. Okay, so the first item of business is that I'm going to pass the chair to Director Toth, who's the vice chair of the SCRD. I'm going to likely ask clarification questions depending on the content of the presentation, so I need the time to get myself organized as the presentation goes on. Director Toth, will you please take chair for this first item?
Thank you, Chair. Next up, we have presentations and delegations. And we do have a presentation from the province of British Columbia and the Seashelt Nation regarding changes to the dock management plan. I've got Jennifer Spencer's name on the agenda, but I'll turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves before you start your presentation. After the presentation, I will look to directors for questions about the presentation material before I consider opening the floor to members of the gallery. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys. Just so you know, you will have to pull those microphones pretty close to you to be picked up.
Perfect. And I might be sitting between the two cameras. Just sort ourselves out. There we go. All right. Join here.
Yeah. And then leave there again, otherwise we get noise flag around.
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. Pull up the PowerPoint. All right. Good afternoon, board members. It's nice to see you. My name is Tony Ann Minen. I'm a Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship with the province of BC. I have to my left Jamie Hagman, who's a Senior Land Officer with the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, and we're also joined with us today by Julia Grant, our section head in the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, as well as negotiators from the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, Jennifer Spencer and Paul Carey. And we also have our colleagues here from Shashal, and I'll ask or invite you.
Good afternoon, board members. It's nice to see you again. I'm Jasmine Paul. I'm a strategic advisor to the Seashelt Nation, and I'm joined today by CAO Sean Maloney and Hwash Stephen Fusjak, the Stewardship and Territorial Land Management Divisional Manager, and Nicole from the Rights and Title Department. Thank you.
Great, so we'll move on in the presentation. So just a bit of an outline for what we'll go through today. We'll introduce the purpose of why we're here and invited to present to you, provide some background information about the changes that we're proposing to the Sechelt-Souya Dock Management Plan, the rationale for these amendments, an overview of what they are, and discussion about the improvements within these new changes. And we'll also be sure to highlight the engagement opportunity for the public in this during our open engagement session. So we're here today. We have heard from SDRD representatives that you would like to hear from BC and Chishal about the collaborative work that we're doing together. So thank you for the invitation to come to present to the board and share this update with you as part of our broader engagement on these proposed changes to the dock management plan. We invite you to ask us questions about these proposed changes and how these proposed changes might impact on local government interests. So I want to, through background slide, just provide some, start with the context that best management practices have been around in federal and provincial contexts for a really long time to explain and build docks appropriately in both federal and provincial contexts.
Excuse me, could I ask that you speak a little slower and more loudly?
I'm going to check with the board. Directors, are you able to hear the presenter? Okay,
The people in the back of the room and
Thank you.
some folks are hard of hearing and
they will, I ask that they do their best, but the meeting is recorded. You can review it later. And I don't know what the volume level is like in the hallway.
inquiry.
Thank you.
So BC and Chishal have been working together to minimize the impacts from docks on the foreshore, making sure that we protect the environmental and archaeological resources that we all hold dear. In 2015, we brought that direction, these best management practices together in the Pender Harbour Dock Management Plan, and in 2018 began implementing that joint plan co-developed by the province and Chishal Nation. That plan in 2018 provided guidance about how to construct docks with best management practices as well as zoning in the Calpalin management area. In 2021, we made some amendments to the plan, particularly for administrative and clarity purposes. And at that time, we also expanded the best management practices for docks in that plan to now apply across the SWIA, including in freshwater. I just wanted to quickly touch on the fact that in 2021, those changes to the dock management plan were posted online, including with the boundary to which the best management practices now applied. We also produced a brochure to explain those changes. And since 2021, we have been working with applicants. Dock applicants have been using the new dock management plan, and BC and Chishal staff have been working with applicants to inform them about the requirements and support them through their review process as they submit for new or replacement applications. I think foundational in our dock management planning work is that the dock management plan creates objectives and principles through which we are able to manage and protect, and in certain cases where necessary, restore the environmental and archaeological values that we have in the foreshore. And those are foundational to all of the work that we've been doing together between Chishal and the province. And in 2021, as part of that review, we considered the dock width requirements, and part of the feedback that we were receiving from the public and through applicants trying to work with the best management practices. So we considered as part of that review the dock width requirements, but decided in 2021 that we needed more information in order to contemplate any changes to those specific requirements. I'll get you forward to the next slide. So recognizing the need to look at different alternatives to the dock width requirement, we commissioned an engineering report to take a look at that and to inform further considerations. So what we have in front of us here today are current amendments to the plan that now reflect an alternative approach for the best management practices related to the dock width requirements. They are provided in the engineering report, and these changes meet the environmental and archaeological objectives of the Shishal Nation and the province. And I want to really highlight that we think that these are really important changes and good changes for us to make. They shift away from a width requirement to an area-based requirement that creates more flexibility for dock applicants who are looking to follow the best management practices and bring their dock into compliance. We know that a number of people have been working with the dock management plan and have been already through their interim tenures working towards bringing their dock into compliance, and that's an important step that they're taking, and this provides greater flexibility for more people to be able to do that. So at this point, I'm going to first maybe offer you anything to add.
Thank you, Tony Ann. I just want to echo your comments that I think this is, Sishak Nation sees this as a positive step forward. We're responding to comments that we received from the public and residents in 2021 and looking for flexibility. We've also had a lot of success in the last number of years in implementing the dock management plan and protecting the resources that are so important to all of us. And we're glad to see that things are...
It's a presentation to the board. The board members can hear it. I just had somebody tell me that the sound levels are quite
Why
good.
the hell are we here? So we don't need to hear it?
It's
That's
on.
why we're here, to hear what's going on. Well, everybody.
Could I please remind you, sir, and everyone else in this room that this is a safe and respectful work environment. We're not going to have foul language, raised voices. Yes.
Just can't hear, and the lady can't hear.
And
other
you were
people
told,
can't. Okay,
we're,
turn up
we're
the
all
volume.
doing the best we can. If we turn up the volume too much, it's gonna start feeding back. We're trying very hard to accommodate everyone that chose to share this space with us today. You are welcome here to share this space with us respectfully, and we will do our best to make sure you can hear it. It is being recorded. You will be able to pick up anything you missed later. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I will seek to speak a little louder without blowing people's ears out. So certainly we've seen a lot of success in the last number of years in issuing tenures and seeking to protect the resources that are important to all of us. And we see this as another step forward in doing that through engagement and response to the public and making sure that what we're doing is improving the environment short and long term. So we're excited to be here to talk to the board about that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'll pass it over to Jamie now to walk us through what those proposed changes are.
Great, thanks everyone. At this point, we'll be moving into the actual numbers, so apologies for all of the numbers you're about to see. So as Tony Ann had mentioned, we are proposing to move away from a dock width requirement to a maximum float area. So currently in the dock management plan, there is a maximum width for the float of 1.5 meters. And these proposed changes are proposing to move to an area base instead. So that would be a maximum area of 30 meters squared for private moorage floats instead of a maximum width of 1.5 meters for floats. Now, to be clear, that's relating to the floats, not to the piers, not to the walkways, etc., specifically to the portion of the dock that is floating on the water. So in these examples, you can see a number of different configurations that would fit within that 30 meters squared, giving alternatives for the floats to be produced in a way or designed in a way that is suitable for the dock owner. So adding additional flexibility on top. Now there are other changes as well, so I'll go through those really quickly here, and then I will have some further details later as we go. So the first one is an updated title for clarity that the dock management plan applies throughout the Shishal Swaya, not only Calpalin. So not only Pender Harbor, but the rest of the Swaya as well. We're also proposing to separate out the best management practices for private moorages and commercial moorages. There are some changes to some best management practices. We already talked about area versus width, but I do have some other ones I'll go through in future slides, as well as updating mapping and terminology with the Shah-Shishalham names where changes have been made. There's also an addition for requirement for inspections. I will talk about that in the next slide. And as well, additional clarity surrounding boathouses on private mortgages. All right, so there is quite a large table here, and I'm going to go through each item individually. That's okay. All right, so as we see here, there are separate best management practices for private mortgage and commercial mortgage, which is why this table is separated out into different columns. So starting with the first best management practice here, with the maximum width of access ramp and walkways. So this is actually the proposed same width for both private mortgage and commercial mortgage, being 1.8 meters. Previously, this was 1.2 meters, so this is an increase in the width in order for accessibility purposes. Now, we did talk about maximum float width for private mortgage already. So with the new proposed changes, there's no maximum float width proposed for private mortgage. That would move to the float area based. However, for commercial mortgage, there is a proposal for 3-meter wide main floats, as well as a maximum width for 1.5 meters for the float fingers. Now, moving on to the float area, as I had mentioned already for private mortgage, there's maximum float area of 30 meters squared being proposed. And then for commercial mortgage, there's actually a maximum float area that's a bit larger of 40 meters squared per vessel, noting that commercial mortgages often have more than one vessel there, up to 40 feet length overall. As well, there's proposals for maximum total length of docks. These are separate between private mortgage and commercial mortgage, with private mortgage being 50 meters, commercial mortgage being 60 meters, and I'll have some diagrams about this further on. And then as I alluded to in my last slide, there are proposals for annual mortgage inspections. Now, the intent of these inspections are for them to be self-led, so to be done by the dock owner or tenure holder or whoever they deem necessary or suitable to do so. So perhaps it's their neighbor, perhaps it's their friend, their family, whatever it may be. And these are inspections that are required to be completed annually by the authorization holder, which would be done through a template. This is similar for private mortgage and commercial mortgage. However, with the commercial mortgage, that would be required to be submitted with the annual statutory declaration. The next item is related to outdoor lighting, and this is the same for both private and commercial mortgage, which is that outdoor lighting should be minimized and should be on a timer or motion detector for environmental purposes. And then last but not least, we have boathouses. So in private mortgage, boathouses within private mortgage tenures are not in alignment with provincial policy and Shishal procedures, and the dock management plan has been updated to align with these policies. Commercial mortgage, on the other hand, has a different approach, as they are permitted within the policies, and there is clarification in the dock management plan in relation specifically to the light penetration best management practice, that applications for boathouses within commercial mortgages must demonstrate alignment with the goals and intent of the plan. And again, the goals and the intent of the plan, of course, being to protect environmental and archaeological resources. Now, as promised, I did say that there would be some more diagrams and examples. So, for the commercial mortgage area-based float, as you can see here, the proposed maximum area for the floats in commercial mortgage is 40 meters squared per vessel, up to 40 feet length overall for the vessels. Now, the easiest way to calculate this is to determine the area of all of the floats of the commercial mortgage, and then divide it by the number of vessels that are supported by that. So as you can see here, the total area of the floats for this commercial mortgage example is 195. We can see there are 5 boats. So in total, that's 39 meters squared per boat. Now, this is just an example. These, obviously, every commercial mortgage is different and individual and unique, and there can be more boats and less boats, etc. So as you can see here, there are scenarios where you can have the same float configuration, the same area of floats, and perhaps support more boats. So this gives the opportunity to have a commercial mortgage that fits your needs and designed for what the commercial mortgage needs. And as promised, I have a diagram here relating to the total length of dock. I've specifically given an example here for commercial moorage, but essentially the diagram would look similar for private moorage. So as mentioned, the total length for commercial moorage is proposed to be 60 meters long, and that's from the high water mark to the end of the moorage structure. So as you can see here, the floats and the ramp are included in this total length, and anything above the high water mark is not included in that total length. So if there's a long pier or ramp or whatever it may be above the high water mark, that would not be included in that total length of dock. All right. So what has not changed? There are a number of best management practices that are staying the same in these proposed amendments to the dock management plan, and this is because they're effective measures in order to meet the goals and intent of the dock management plan, being environmental protection and protection of archaeological resources. So I just want to highlight some of those right here. So the zoning within Calpaland remains unchanged and in place. So it's the exact same as we've always seen it. The green zone, red zone, purple zone, all of those still exist in the same way. And there are also many best management practices that have not changed and are consistent for both private and commercial moorage. So I've highlighted some of them here. There are other ones as well that remain the same, but I figured we'd just highlight a few of the most important ones here. So docks, inclusive of all components, must allow for a minimum of 43% open space, allowing for light penetration of the water surface under the structure. Habitat should be avoided within the dock footprint, and the bottom of all floats must be a minimum of 1.5 meters above the seabed during the lowest tide. And last but not least, the use of styrofoam to keep docks afloat is prohibited unless that foam is encapsulated. So thank you for listening to those numbers. I'm going to pass it over to Tony Ann and Jasmine to finish us off.
Thanks, Jamie. So I wanted to highlight again the fact that these changes to the dock design and the shift from a 1.5 meter dock width requirement to 30 meters area create increased flexibility for dock designs. This allows us to have more docks in compliance with that best management practice, and they also maintain the integrity of the objectives of what we're trying to achieve through the dock management plan, which is the protection of environmental and archaeological resources. We've also increased our clarity, so we've shifted away from having multiple documents around best management practices on how you build a dock. We have merged all of that into one document for the Seychelles SWIA dock management plan, and so guidance about what happens or what the expectations are in Calpaland are now included in that one document. We've increased clarity on the best management practices for commercial and private moorages, again, allowing for the flexibility needed for commercial moorage holders to build dock designs that are in good, help us mitigate the impacts of those environmental and archaeological resources, while also providing alternatives and providing space for moorage in the Seychelles SWIA. And we've increased the clarity on boathouses in alignment with provincial policies. So very clearly, the provincial policy clearly states that boathouses are not permitted on private moorages. This is in alignment with provincial policy, as I just said, as well as with Shishal procedures. That clarity is now more explicitly clear in the in the dock management plan. And we have clarified that boathouses are permitted on commercial moorages under both the provincial policy and therefore under the dock management plan. We also know, just for clarity around the shift from 1.5 meters to 30 meters, so those folks who have, for the majority of people who have been fully approved since 2018 with their dock tenure, will be in compliance with this shift. So if you have been fully approved under a 1.5 meter dock width, then you are, the majority of those folks will be in compliance under the 30 meters squared approach. So I want to highlight, just round out our presentation here with sharing with the board what the opportunities for public input are and where that opportunity for feedback is. So one thing I want to highlight on the slide here, that we have heard that there is an interest to have more time to review these changes and to provide the province and Shishal with comments and feedback. So we have extended the date from previously December 15th to January 12th, 2024. So we hope that that provides the public a greater opportunity to provide us comments. Comments will be received through written submission. The website is available on the screen in front of us and can be made available to the SCRD board members to share with people who are interested. And that opportunity, that is where we encourage comments and feedback to be shared. Additional opportunities will be provided to hear from commercial mortgage tenure holders to allow for specific questions and opportunities for feedback. That feedback will be submitted through written submissions to the above website. And it's important to be very clear that these are proposed amendments, so the comments that we receive through the public, through the website will be summarized, and those that are relevant to the amendments that we've made or are proposing to make will be provided to the decision makers for their consideration as we take this recommendation to both Shishal and BC decision makers. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present these changes to the SCRD board and offer Jasmine another opportunity to share some thoughts.
Thank you, Tony Ann and Jamie. I would just look forward to engagement with the board on this. I hope the last slide, I think, is the really important slide, although the numbers were summarized very well. This is really about providing flexibility to tenure applicants while ensuring that we are doing our utmost to protect the environment and address impacts from dock tenures, and ensure that going forward we are placing the value on environmental resources and protecting the values that are so important to all of us. So thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Directors, I will turn to you. Any questions for our presenters today?
My hand won't raise.
Director Lee?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I just have a few things I'd like to say, and actually they're good things about having a dock management plan. It is appreciated. Ability to have a dock and a float tenure within our harbors is a big step forward from way back in 2003. So I consider we're making good progress. Maybe not that fast, but good progress. Collaborating with and respecting our First Nation concerns, including protecting their rights to harvest and preserve intertidal areas of our shoreline, addressing their concerns associated with archaeological instances, and sharing decision-making on use of public lands within their territory is what I see a positive step in getting us into the modern world. And thank you for most of the existing and proposed best practices. Grading is a new standard, and it's being now widely accepted. I see a lot of docks built with it, and they're good docks. They're quite usable. Encapsulated foam, for me, is a giant step forward to help our waters. The ramp width under this new appears very appropriate for wheelchair access for people loading their boats with wheelbarrows. And acknowledging that a minimum 1.5 meter main float is not the standard to use is, to me, very, very important. And we're going to ask some questions here. They might not be worded quite appropriately, but I hope you take them in the spirit that we're asking. We didn't have much time to do this, and we haven't had a lot of time to craft them. But we think it's time we should ask those questions now to clarify what you just presented for us. So take them for the way they are. They're meant well. And like I had said, if we had more time, they'd been far more elegant, shorter, and easily understood. So bear with us.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Inkster.
I just wanted to ask the delegation if there's an intention and/or a plan to come and speak to the District of Sechelt. When the information was previously provided, and it was referenced as this is the part of the large SWIA discussion, with Sechelt in a sense, and the Seychelles being in the very, almost the center of the SWIA. I was wondering if there was a plan to come and talk to the District of Sechelt with all the shores that are contained within Sechelt.
We haven't worked that into our engagement plan at this point. Obviously, the information about the changes are available to tenure holders. Most of the tenure holders that have an application with us or tenure with us have been notified of this, so the information is available. We can follow up offline if they're about what more information the DOS may want as a board, I think that's the right term, to be informed about this. But to be very clear, the engagement process for this piece of work is through written submission. So we welcome the DOS to provide that opportunity to your constituents about finding the information available online and providing written comments through that submission process.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to note, we do have 183 attendees joining us virtually today, and one of them is our Director of Planning in Sechelt. So hopefully there will be an opportunity for some feedback. Director White.
Just wanted to kind of follow up some of Director Lee's comments early on here. And I know Director Lee's been doing work and looking around at the present state of docks in Area A, and hearing from community members, and really taking a deep dive into like how docks are currently used, commercial marinas, residential docks, and safety concerns too, stability, buoyancy of docks. And I'm wondering if that kind of just baseline consideration of use of docks in the area were concerned or were considered as part of this kind of, the reconciling that with the environmental needs and by professionals who were looking at the state of docks right now compared to what the province is hoping for. Like, was there a study done? Was there a survey done on like what the current state of docks and what the needs of commercial fishing needs, residential needs, safety concerns?
So I can take it first. So the best management practices that are included in the dock management plan are informed by environmental and engineering professionals and are used in other jurisdictions as well. So they are standards that we have borrowed from others to bring into the dock management plan here. Further to these specific changes that we are proposing, that was supported by an engineering study that again looked at what different approaches to that 1.5 meter, which it was an existing best management practice, but what other alternatives might be available out there. And we are aware, and the engineering report points to places where the 30-meter squared approach has been used in other parts, including in the Burrard Inlet. And so there is experience in other jurisdictions where this approach and this change to, or this proposal around a 30-meter squared approach does fit. I hope I've addressed your question. Offer you anything else?
Thank you, Tony. And yeah, that was, I would just echo those words and say that this has been successfully applied throughout the SWEA for the last number of years and supported by reports from other engineers. So we do know that it is safe. And that was an important part of the work that was done. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Thank you. I'm interested in if there has been any expressions of interest from other nations in how they can apply these best practices, and if you see this as a possibility for a template in other parts of the coast.
I think, Director Stanford, I think that this is definitely, we're aware that other nations are taking a look at the conversation here. I think our discussion and our purpose for bringing this to the board today is to really highlight what these changes are in the area. But knowing that the best management plan, or the dock management plan and the best management practices have been applied, and the way in which they've been applied is a good news story. It's something that we are demonstrating success as BC and Shishal in delivering on these best management practices, making decisions that allow people the time to come into compliance with the best management practices in a way that protects the environment and the archaeological resources now and into the future. These are really good things for us to be modeling in the Seychelles SWIA, and I think that's something that we can all look to support and continue to lead into in this work.
Thank you. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you, delegation. I'm interested in in learning more about the implications of this dock management plan on commercial marinas. There's a few in my areas, so this is a particular interest. The diagrams that we have here show the biggest number of boats is 8 per dock, and I'm wondering, like, what would that look like for a commercial marina that I'm assuming needs space for more than 8 boats? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think to highlight the fact that these diagrams were just meant to kind of explain kind of the main float and the finger width and the overall length, but we anticipate that dock commercial moorages will have multiple different configurations, and those are permitted for in the dock design. So we can we won't get into specifics about specific marinas here, but that's a feedback that can be provided through the written comment section, as well as hopefully we can provide a little bit more clarity and walk through some of that as we engage with the commercial moorage holders. Anything
Thank you.
You want to add technically? Okay, got it.
Director Lee.
Yes, I was interested in that reply, because if you use the 60 meter, and if you apply that square footage to a single marina, you'd end up with 8 boats, 10 boats total. We have marinas like 50 boats. And you could not configure that in any conceivable way to have 50 boats in the marina. So is there some allowance to allow the marinas to continue with their current capacity on the design of the floats?
Do you want to technically answer that and go for it?
Yeah, thank you, Director Lee, for the question. Certainly, and some of you will know, certainly we have been encouraging for quite some time between the province and Seychelles Nation to create commercial moorages and aggregate moorages. We want to contain and aggregate the impacts of these facilities. So we know that, and we're sorry that the diagram on the PowerPoint wasn't more clear, but we do know that these standards will apply in those larger settings, and those are the settings that we want to occur in this way, so that the impacts are in one area and we can mitigate as best we can and address the impacts in those areas. So certainly we've applied them and looked at some of the commercial moorages in this way, and we know that it will work. And we're looking forward to conversations with those commercial tenure holders to discuss what potential concerns they may have. But we have considered that, and we're certainly not saying, it can only be 5 boats or 10 boats or whatever was in the slide, because we actually want people to have boats all in one place. Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the answer, because the question was, would there be a configuration that would allow that marina to continue under a
Yes.
single lease with 50
Yes.
boats in it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Lee, I'm going to go to you next because I know you've been having some problems getting your hand up. So did you want to ask a question, or do you want me to come back to you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He surprised me. Saltwater best practices are, in my opinion, are not the same for freshwater structures. Freshwater has quite a, in my experience, has quite a few different requirements than saltwater. For instance, there's no eelgrass, and there's no real growth on the bottom of lakes. So my question is, will there be separate best practices developed for the freshwater environment?
So thank you for the question, Director Lee. So at the moment, that we're not proposing any changes to the dock management plan around differences between saltwater and freshwater. The objective of the dock management plan is to protect the archaeological and environmental resources that we do find in both fresh and marine foreshore areas. And so I think at this point, we have not proposed any changes for that. And again, if that's, we welcome the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you.
I would just add to that we, again, have been successfully applying this in the freshwater context for some time now. And there are, although there's no eelgrass, there is other important resources, and, in particular, critically endangered salmon species within Saginaw Lake, for example. And we're looking to protect those resources because they do also contribute to the environment that we all hold so dear. So, yes, they will continue to apply.
Thank you. Director White, I see your hand up. I know you're leaving us here shortly, so I'm going to let you go ahead.
Yeah, I do apologize to the board and our presenters. I had a prior commitment to this special meeting being called, and I have to catch a ferry. So I wanted to ask about boathouses. I do recognize that there's been provincial policy in place since 2011, so it's that's part of the rationale in this update in talking about those changes in 2011. The language that we've identified was in the Crown Land Use Operational Policy for private moorages do not use roofed or covered structures on or adjacent to the dock unless permitted by local bylaw. So I just wanted to, when this started, this was framed as, about the impact on local government interests. So I'm wondering, where does local government autonomy and authority, that delegation of authority, in that policy fit into the dock management plan, and if bylaws are changed over time or introduced, how do we work with the province and the nation to have those with the separate authorities that are now in place?
Thank you for the question. So, and acknowledging that boathouses are not part of permitted under provincial policy. I also want to, we went back and confirmed with our policy colleagues around what the definition of a roof structure is, and we have heard from them that a roof structure is anything other than a boathouse. The province remains concerned about boathouses due to their potential, the potential for their impact to environmental and archaeological resources. And so while the policy permits local governments to create their own bylaws to manage for structures on docks, It is expected that the province and Shishal and local governments work together in understanding that the protections that BC and Shishal are looking for in terms of the foreshore and the environmental protections that are secured through the dock management plan and the best management practices are met. And then further to that, if there's other things that the local government would like to bring into place under their ability to bylaw, those would be in addition to the environmental protections that the province and Shishal would be looking for.
Just to follow up on boathouses as well, are there grandfathering clauses for boathouses approved prior to 2012 or 2011? Sorry, and are there any that will be allowed to stay when their tenure's up for renewal in those kinds of cases, or is the expectation that when the tenure's up they need to be?
The expectation is that when tenures come up for replacement, that the docks are at that point in time in compliance with the best management practices. There may be scenarios where interim tenures are used in order to provide dock applicants and dock owners with the ability to come into compliance over time. But the expectation is that once that interim tenure is at its due date, that they will be in compliance with the best management practices.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So no grandfathering to answer the question. Director Lee.
Yeah, the engineering design changes appear to be proposed because they'll have a beneficial impact on the marine ecology. But I note that the engineering report does not footnote any scientific resources to support the suggested maximum size. And so I was curious why 30 square meters was proposed as being the ideal size of float. Why 30 square meters was proposed as being the ideal size of floats for all boats and all purposes.
So once again, the engineering report was the tool in which we sought to inform our decision-making around the proposed request that we had received from public engagement and from our working with applicants to be in alignment with best management practices. That engineering report provided its recommendation, and BC and Shishal undertook a review of that report and agreed with that approach, or agreed to recommend that approach to our decision makers. So I don't know that I can provide further clarity on the in the engineering report itself, but that came to us from a professional engineer, and it was part of how we informed our decision making. Jasmine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, again, just to echo Tony Ann's comments, it was important that we use, third-party professionals and engaging with them in informing the decision around this. We're also looking to other areas, and we know that this standard has been applied successfully. In fact, it has been applied successfully within Sishaxwaya for some time now, and it is important that we minimize the impact from these docks. We do know that docks have tangible impacts on Sishak Nation, Swaya, and on the values that we all hold dear. And so this is a way of addressing the concerns that we heard from the public, that is guided by the advice of professionals, and allowing us to move forward in a thoughtful way.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on that just before I go to the next speaker. Are those engineering studies publicly available documents, or are they held in confidence? Thanks.
That is something that we will look into, and we will get back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stop. Thank you. Director Bax, you haven't had a chance to ask a question yet?
Well, through the chair, I'm just curious as to what the number of private-held boathouses are in the Swaya, and I'm just wondering what, I understand that these boathouses are no longer in compliance with the with the provincial legislation now. And I just wonder what the number is. Is there, does anyone have that information? Just for,
My understanding is that they haven't actually been allowed since 2011. But
Exactly.
I'll look to our
right,
presenters
so
for
the
clarity
old
there.
ones, how many old ones are there?
Okay. Do we know that information offhand? Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Director McMahon, you haven't had a chance to ask a question yet either.
Thank you. This is a curiosity question, as my area has no docks. We do, however, have lots of marine styrofoam washing up, I will mention, but we also have federal harbors. How does the federal government fit into all of this?
So the dock management plan is a tool in which the province and Shishal work together to inform how docks under the Land Act are brought or follow and protect the environmental and marine foreshore. Again, they're built off of best management practices that are used elsewhere. So the expectation is that in other ways, the hope is that we're also protecting those spaces, but the dock management plan applies to docks that are authorized under the Land Act.
And I will just add that the federal government in the past has had very similar policies, best management practices that were actually used as a part of designing these best management practices. So I'm sure that our federal colleagues are looking at similar concerns.
Yes, I'm on the Harbor Authority in Pender Harbor, and we look after 3 federal docks there, and they're still installing the traditional 9-foot wide solid decked, floating on, well, they're at least floating on plywood billets or plywood floats, so they're not infringing on the encapsulated. Is the provincial government working with the federal government to get a new standard so that those docks will be upgraded to the standard you're suggesting here?
Yeah, so just confirming with Jamie, I'm not aware of anything specifically. I think that that's something that we can take back and take a look at in terms of the jurisdictional question between whose authority those docks are working under. But thank you for your question. We can follow up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it is relatively important to us in that the federal government is divesting the docks, and we asked them to bring it up to a current standard before we take it over. So if and I'm referring to the SCRD because we're doing such similar things here, if we're going to have to bring it up to the standard that we're suggesting here, we're going to have to I believe we would have to rethink our policy. But I also hear that if the docks that we have got now, and we've taken over ownership from the federal government, we're going to have to bring them up to this standard that we just talked about here then. Would that be a correct statement?
Excuse me. I'll get you to follow up and back me up. So my understanding, the expectation for the protection and the objectives of the dock management plan to manage for the environmental and archaeological resources there that'll be the expectation for those docks. However, those docks are issued under a different component of the Land Act as underneath the institutional policy that we have under the Land Act. And so currently, the dock management applies to private and commercial moorage docks. And so those, there may be more time to come into compliance or alternative methods for the SCRD and institutional docks to come into compliance.
Good, I like that answer, thank you.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. We briefly brought up the word styrofoam, and I was very pleased to see that encapsulated styrofoam is the next step forward. My question is, there been any consideration for end-of-life disposal responsibilities? I've yet to see encapsulated styrofoam that a really motivated otter and a large piece of log can't get through. So I'm just looking for more specifics on what encapsulated styrofoam means and how best practices can evolve. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure that I have a specific answer for that. I think that as we learn more about the impacts from dock design and components, as you mentioned, around encapsulated foam, I think that that's something that we continue to learn and follow best management practices and science on. And so as we may learn more and make and consider that into the future, but at this point, they're not part of the standards. If we have specific follow-up questions about encapsulated foam and the definitions to that, that should be clearly outlined in the dock management plan, but if there's further questions, we can follow up on that.
Thank you. Director Lee.
You're surprised I have a question? Yeah. Oh. Yes, I'd like to get a little clarification here. I come from a fishing family, by the way. Most fishing vessels now are well over 12 meters, 40 feet, and 18 meters, 60 feet, and 21 meters, 70 feet are very common now in Pender Harbor with our fishermen. Actually, they need that size of boats to engage in all of the fisheries they need to engage in to make a living. And we're fortunate, some of our fishermen are quite fortunate in that they're moored to private docks. And commercial fisher persons use their private docks for equipment build and maintenance, hanging nets, boat maintenance, equipment changeovers as they go after different species. And these docks and floats need to be very long and very wide so the fisher people can do their work. The example would be net racking, where you put new lines on each end of the net and fix the holes. Will this be allowed to continue?
Thank you for framing out that scenario. We won't be able to address the specifics about that scenario, but welcome you to share that scenario with us through the written feedback and comments. And we'll consider that as part of our package that we share with decision makers.
That would be great. It's a very old practice in the harbor.
Thank you. Do you have another question, Director Lee?
I stayed up most of the night writing these up. Many of our recreation boats are over the 12 meters, 40 feet. In fact, I have a 30-foot boat and it's considered small now. And up to 21 meters or 60 feet, it's very common in the harbor. And the square footage, as proposed, would actually be too narrow and would fail the buoyancy and stability safety concerns. Would an exemption be approved if a qualified professional proposed it, or how would that work?
Thank you again for raising a scenario. We may not be able to address the specific scenario, but that is another one that you're welcome to share with us in the public comment period. I also want to make note that the dock management plan allows for and encourages, as Jasmine said earlier, a variety of different moorage opportunities in the SWIA. And we know that we need to understand that in certain cases, the marine condition the environmental foreshore, the risks of the foreshore and the archaeological values there may not make it suitable to have a dock in all the cases that are necessary to meet the dock or the boat's desired size in some conditions. So the dock management plan and our approach with Shishal about how we manage for docks in the SWIA allows for alternatives to exist within the SWIA. So we invite you to share that comment and that question with us in terms of that specific scenario, and that'll be part of our consideration. But we do feel strongly that there are the dock management plan allows for us to have those alternatives and to also make sure that we are protecting the environment where that is important.
Go ahead, Director Lee.
I'm coming to the end of my list, I promise. We have quite a few docks that require a long approach. 100-foot walkway is, well, it's not uncommon to get to deep water. You'd have a 100-foot walkway, okay, 30 meters. You'd have a 15-meter ramp, 45-foot float, and it will be over the allowable 50 meters. Will there be some consideration given to grandfathering those ones that are in place? Some people have invested quite a lot of money. You can see very aluminum walkways just put in, very modern floats. Be nice if there was some grandfathered rather than as soon as the tenure expires, they got to come out. Anyways, is there any room for that appeal process or special consideration or anything in the policy?
So I appreciate again the scenario around dock length and the challenge that some dock owners may have in terms of the total length, and recognizing that in certain marine spaces that the distance to which you need to access kind of deep water for that dock may vary. And I want to be clear that as we as applicants and dock owners apply for renewals or apply for new authorizations under the Land Act, they are expected to follow the best management practices, explain to the province how that works. But each individual dock application is reviewed by professional staff in the province and Shishal, taking into consideration the environmental conditions and the specific sites in that specific dock. So those are things that are considered as part of the review. Again, with the goal and the expectation that the environment is managed and protected for, and in certain cases that those mitigations for those may be required. Is it?
I'd like to thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. It was much appreciated. Sorry I had so many of them, but I am concerned, so I'd like to make sure was clear. So thank you.
You're done? Okay, thank you, directors, for your questions. As was pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, our normal process is to actually take questions from the public at the end of the meeting. However, I will open up the floor to a number of questions from the gallery, so long as they remain respectful. We do have a handheld microphone, which you will need to use for attendees online to be able to hear you. Any questions need to pertain to the presentation that was just made, and any need for clarification sort of based on that presentation. All questions must be directed to myself, and if appropriate, either the board will try and answer the question, or I will invite the delegation to answer if it's more technical in nature. Some of your questions may not be able to be answered today. As was shown, we've got a couple of our own questions that we need to hear back on later. Any feedback on the changes does need to be submitted in writing to the address that was provided on the screen before January 12th. So with that, I actually have two hands online first. I'm going to go to the online attendees first, and then we'll come to the folks in the room. So, Linda, I'm going to give you permission to unmute your microphone.
Hello.
Hello, Linda.
No, it's David.
Okay. Go ahead and ask your question.
My background is for economic development in Scotland and then the east of England. Nobody appears to be concerned about the economic development impact of this move on Pender Harbour. Pender Harbour is only 3,000 people. I calculate that over the next 3 years, the economy of Pender Harbour will decrease by at least 30% if this measure goes through. That would probably mean the closing of some really important stores for us. Can somebody take on the responsibility for economic development, please?
I mean, there is a SCREDO, Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization. If you've got concerns about economic impact of the changes that are being proposed to the dock management plan, I think that's not an answer you're going to get today. I think that's most suited to submission through the online portal for feedback.
Then why are we putting these proposals forward if you haven't considered the economic impact on Pender Harbour?
This is a presentation by the province to the SCRD board on changes that are being considered, and public feedback is open. So these changes are not by any means a given or a slam dunk.
Okay, well, I'm giving you public feedback. The impact could be the closing of stores like IGA and the pharmacy in Madeira Park if this move goes through.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
I would like to help answer that question. There is a policy, the provincial government policy under the Crown land allocation, and they note that the province has a responsibility to ensure it's managed to maximize and sustain the flow of economic, social, and environmental benefits to British Columbia, and that is in the policy. So I welcome you to submit your concern, and the provincial government has an obligation to, under their policy, to consider that. So I'm sure that will be done. Thanks.
Okay, there's one other person with their hand up that I'm going to give permission to speak, and then we'll take some questions in the room.
Thanks for this opportunity. My question is about the docks and boathouses, specifically on like Ruby and Saginaw, that maybe were built before people got permits and don't have a sort of a tenure that's coming up. What would be the timeline on bringing those docks into compliance?
Sorry, part of your question cut out. I think it was what would be the timeline?
Yes, what would be the timeline on bringing these docks into compliance?
I can answer if you want to.
We're going to try and answer from the board first, because Director Lee may have the answer for you.
I think I have the answer, and I will be corrected if I get it incorrect. The answer to your question is when your tenure is due to be renewed, you must at that point comply with the current regulations, and you'll be asked to do that. And if you're asked by the decision makers to do that, and you do not comply with their direction, at that point, your dock will be removed.
And if we have no tenure?
It should have been removed already.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we will go to a couple of questions in the room. The gentleman right there in the front with the blue folder.
And what I'll do is typically we have people come up to the delegation table. So if everyone bears with me, I'll bring the mic to you and you can answer your question. There may be a couple of people interested that are in
Out
the
in the
foyer.
gallery, or, yeah.
And if it's your pleasure, I'll bring the mic out there at the appropriate time.
Okay.
There was a couple of comments from the delegation on or referring to their decision makers. Who exactly are those decision makers, and who should we be getting a hold of to influence those decision makers?
Yep. So thank you for the question from the chair. So the decision makers will both be Shishal decision makers, and I'll ask Jasmine to share on that, as well as provincial decision makers. The previous plans were approved at the ministerial level and delegated to an assistant deputy minister on this, so we anticipate that those will be our decision makers going forward. Importantly, though, all of the comments received in the public on the public website will be shared directly with the decision makers. So we encourage you to use that forum to connect in with the decision makers. That'll be the most efficient way of us understanding what the comments are and to be able to provide those to our decision makers. And the comments will be shared both with provincial decision makers and with Shishal decision makers.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Yes, that's absolutely accurate, Tony Ann. So for Sishach Nation, it's the Sishach Chief and Council, or the decision makers around development within the SWA and policy for development within the SWA. And they, again, along with their provincial colleagues, will be looking at the comments received from the public through the public portal, the website. So we really, really encourage folks to go on that website and submit your comments. It's an important part of the engagement process. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, another question. I'm sorry, I didn't catch who was in order here.
Can I follow up a question?
If it's super short, because you're taking other people's question time by doing so.
Fine. It's super short. Was there any consideration, it could be really long, but I'll shorten it. Was there any consideration given to the decrease in value of the upland properties associated with the foreshore rights and the foreshore licenses? And it's especially important because the foreshore licenses are so intertwined with the upland parcels and have been for so many years that they form part of that value, a huge part of that value. And has anybody counted those numbers up? And was consideration given to that loss? And is there going to be compensation for that loss?
I don't think you're going to get an answer today, but I think Director Lee would like to.
Yeah, that is outside the presentation that we were given here. It was simply talking about changes, technical changes to the policy. Those questions had been asked several times of our provincial government. I don't know the answer to your question. It would be best to direct the question to the appropriate ministers, provincial ministers again, and see if they will answer. But that's a political question at the highest level, rather than at this level that we're talking about here.
One other comment I did want to make is that I know our MLA was watching. He had to leave to go into session, but his staff are participating. So, Director Bax.
Point of information, thank you. I'd ask the delegation to again share a screen with the contact information for the public input, and leave it up for a few minutes at least, so that people know where they have to go. Thank you.
Yep.
Do we want to do that right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Our screen.
That's okay. And I don't know if you can make that, if you can zoom in on that line or what have you. The monitor break doesn't help anything, of course, but I'm not sure. CAO, did you see who was next?
I was rooting for you on that one, Chair.
All right,
but,
just take a gander.
Here.
Wander out there. That fellow looks good.
First off, thanks to the board for letting us listen in and inviting some comments. Appreciate that. And also asking many of the questions that we're all here sharing the same concerns. My question is specifically around following up on Board Chair Lee's question about freshwater versus saltwater. So, you know, we understand the report done for Pender Harbor is really focused on ocean dock construction, not freshwater dock construction, mostly is wood and has other needs. And so the question really is, have the proponents looked at specific reports or commissioned any reports regarding BMP differences that are necessary for freshwater docks and boathouses as opposed to ocean situations? We've got trouts and turtles. We don't have eelgrass and starfish.
Thank you for that question. I think, you know, at this point, there is not a difference that's being considered for freshwater. That doesn't mean a difference couldn't be considered in the future. But I will invite our delegation to speak to if any work has been done on the freshwater side of things.
Certainly in the development of the best management practices, there was consideration, and we are privileged to work with a number of biologists and other professionals who assisted in the development of these. And so we are confident that they address the environmental concerns within the freshwater as well. But we also encourage you to submit your comments into the public engagement portal. Thank you for the question, Chair.
Thank you. I just want to note that we have a lot of people wanting to ask a lot of questions. We're not going to get to everybody today because we do have other business at this board meeting. So we will have to cut it off at some point. I'm looking at 3 o'clock if our delegation is okay with that. That gives us 13 more minutes for questions. So another person in the room, and then I'll take a couple questions online.
Right. My name is Peter Harvey. I have a boathouse, 55-foot. Sounds like it's 25,000 pounds of garbage at the moment. I have a 1928 classic yacht inside that boathouse, and it's part of our maritime history. It needs to be protected from the sunshine. That's why it's in the boathouse. And it's cultural history for us, and I'd like to keep it protected. I'm okay with replacing the flotation and ultimately the whole boathouse, but only to let the sunshine on the boat would be a waste of time. And I'm not the only one. There's 5 other ones in our area that have the same situation. We go down to the boat shows, and we go down to Victoria, Burrard Yacht Club, and we show off these boats and remind people of our maritime history. These boats do not survive in the elements. Thank you.
Didn't hear a question there, but thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to Paulus. I've given you permission to unmute yourself, and you can ask a question.
Thank you. My name is Andy Paulus. I'm a longtime president of the Coast here, and we have a number of these structures that were built well before any sort of permitting was envisaged here on the coast. Back in the 60s, you built cabins and boathouses and docks just wherever you felt like. I understand it's different now, but there are hundreds, literally hundreds of those boathouses on Saginaw Lake alone. And I know that most of the owners of these boathouses are going to be reluctant to remove them, not only because of the property value thing that's being mentioned before, but loss of enjoyment, no place to keep your boat, you know, endless reasons why people are not going to want to remove their boathouses. So my question is this: I'm hearing the word policy quite a lot here, that this removal of boathouses is against government policy. But a policy is just that, it's not a law. Is there an enforcement mechanism here that people are going to be fined or end up in jail, or somebody else is going to come and remove your boathouse if you choose not to do so?
I will share some experience, and I believe I made the statement a little earlier, and that is, if you don't have a valid tenure and you've built an unauthorized structure on the foreshore, the government can choose to remove that and put the cost on your taxes. And that has happened in the harbor for tidal I have no reason to expect it wouldn't happen once the freshwater is being addressed. Now, I'd be interested to see if I have that right or wrong. Just to add to that, there's no reason to fine you. They'll just take them away.
So, Chair, if I might, I think thank you for the question, and I appreciate your response, Director Lee. I think it's important to note that the province recognizes that there may have been things done prior to in the past. Is important, and the expectation of the government that people have authorized and legal docks in the foreshore underneath the Land Act. If there's a scenario where you don't yet have authorization for your dock, you are encouraged to apply and seek that avenue to come into legal authorization under your dock. The expectation will be that the dock management plan applies, but our preference and the requirement under law is that you do have a legal and authorized dock. So we encourage those who may not have that there to reach out to the province and to seek to understand what the requirements are to bring their dock to apply for a legal tenure under the Land Act.
Thank you.
She just said she's going to be very nice to you guys, so thank you.
Jasmine.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo Tony Ann's comments that we really do encourage those who, for whatever reason in the past, did not have tenures to reach out to the province. And we have worked with those who did not have tenures in the past to bring them into a compliance. So I really encourage folks to do that. It is an important part of the way that we govern the foreshore within the SWAIA, but also within the province. Thank you so much.
Thank you. CAO McKinley, have you got another person with a question?
I've got three in line here, if that's
Perfect.
okay, Chair.
Guy with the mustache.
Yeah, hi. My question is whether these plans have been vetted by a marine biologist or an oceanographer.
I believe I heard it mentioned marine biologist.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, absolutely. On our professional team, we do have marine and other biologists that we rely on as we develop these standards. So, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try and ask a not situational question. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there's a number of tenures out there that do not have a specified end date to them, yet it's until the transfer on title is made. There are clauses in those tenures that state the province or the nation has the right to redact that tenure. Is this something that we could expect when the dock management plan comes into place, that the province is going to take all liberties to redact tenures that have that clause? Thank you.
I have no idea. I don't know if... Is it
Might not be able to answer that question today.
no, but I guess it's...
Very important question. Our delegation's just conferring you may not get the answer to that question today, but
So again, to your director, Toth, that's something that we can direct towards the public online forum. I want to be clear around our expectation that we work with dock applicants through their application process to understand the tenures and work with people to ensure that we can have docks in the SWIA that protect the environment. And so it's our interest to make sure that those docks continue to protect or do the least harm to the environmental and archaeological values. But we welcome that comment through the public forum.
thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of maybe a three-part question.
There's a lot of tenures that are coming up very quickly. As I understand, tenure date began in 2015. So a lot of people have docks that will require a lot of work and no time to do it. So that's one thing. The second thing is I was fortunate to witness August 3rd, the removal of 4 docks in Gunboat Bay, where a barge was brought in, I understand, from Victoria, and it methodically went around and retrieved the docks up to the property lines of the owners. And the dock disappeared, or the barge disappeared down the end of the bay, loaded, and offloaded down the end of the bay. So I'm kind of curious as to what happened with those docks. Some of them certainly were saleable. Also, the environment, we're talking about environmental issues here and concerns. What are you going to do with all this stuff that's getting torn out that has to be rebuilt? Isn't there going to be more damage to the environment in this process than benefit? Is the squeeze worth the juice?
Thank you. Those questions aren't really relevant to the changes that are being made or proposed here today. They're really not, but you're welcome to provide that feedback through the web portal. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Sean McAllister. I've been on the Dock Management Committee for the last 9 years. It's taken up most of my retirement out here, and thank you for that. I came here with the sole purpose of extending the public engagement time, as it was inordinately short, in my opinion, up till this point. And you've somewhat taken the wind out of my sails, giving us till January 12th. But I'd just like to put this in perspective. The first dock management plan came out in 2015. The subsequent one came out 2018. We provided engineering reports, a naval architect report, marine biology reports in 2019 to the government. And essentially, it has taken that long, since 2019 till now, to get the government to turn the corner to acknowledge that the docks are not safe the way that they're currently designed or mandated. So my thinking is that we should take our time with this. Let's get it right. I've got about 3 or 4 engineers looking at these things now. I don't know if I can get reports in by January 12th. And why would we want to rush this? We don't want to go through another 9 years of unsafe docks that don't work, applications for variances, and everyone having to hire a qualified professional in order to get a variation. So my request to the government, I guess there's a question here somewhere, is would you commit to extending the public engagement period to May 31st? And my buddy also would like to know if his comments are going to be answered if he submits them to you at this place on the screen. That's my question. Thank you.
I'm actually going to hit the second half of that question first, and then we'll come back to the first half. Recognizing you're probably going to receive a lot of comments from folks, do you have a response standard for what gets answered, what doesn't, or is it all just being collected at this point?
The comments that are being provided online are being reviewed by provincial staff. We're looking for things in those comments that we can provide some clarification to in the short term, if that's helpful and those any clarification points or greater clarity we can provide about the changes will be we will be sharing those through updated frequently asked questions, also available on that same webpage. All of the comments that are then received will be summarized and shared with the decision makers as part of their recommendation. So while not every single question may be answered, the expectation is that those comments are being looked at and will be provided to decision makers where they relate to the proposed changes.
Okay. And then with regards to the timeline, I appreciate that, it has been extended to January 12th, January 12th. as was mentioned, not likely long enough. I'm wondering if there's what the logic was that went into the January extension, given the length of time dock management work takes. Thanks.
So we were reviewing some of the questions we received since it's been open since November 24th, and that was one of the feedback we were receiving. So we wanted to make sure that people did have more time to provide some comments. I want to highlight again that these are the proposed changes to 30 meters squares does allow for more folks to come into compliance. It is a change away. It's responsive to what people have been asking for through those dock applications and requests for variances. It does provide more people to be in compliance with the dock that they have and they're looking to build. And so we think that in that case, these are good news story changes, and the scope of these changes are fairly narrow, and so the timeline has been extended but remains short so that we can continue with the decision-making process, summarize those, provide those with our decision makers, and get some clarity through our dock management plan, allowing for people who are waiting to work on their interim tenures and to understand what the expectations are. We want to provide that clarity to those folks in an expedited way and in an efficient, in a meaningful way, so that we can get back to decision making on docks.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Sorry, Jasmine may want to add something.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo Tony Ann's comments. There are folks who are awaiting, and because this is something that we are responding directly to previous comments that we received from the public, and we know that this kind of flexibility is what tenure holders were asking for, it's important that we do get back to them because they have been waiting, and we want to make sure that we can move those tenures along. So there's a benefit in that way as well. And as Tony Ann said, the scope of the changes are small in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Yeah, it's a curiosity question. I was just wondering if you would consider returning to update us after the considerations are all put together and you kind of know where you're going, and could you do that before it goes to the decision makers, or would you actually come and do it after the decision makers, or would you just give us something in writing? How do you think this would follow up, in other words?
Thank you for the request. We will consider that, and we will be engaged with the SCRD about how we can provide an update as we do on some of our other business together.
I do have a motion to make, but I believe Director Bax had his hand up first, so.
Okay, it's residual. Thank you, Director Bax.
I'd like to propose the following motion to the board, that the SCRD request the provincial government extend the period of public engagement on the proposed amended Pender Harbour Dock Management Plan from December 15th, 2023 to May 15th, 2024, in order to give affected citizens and businesses time to consult with their experts and provide meaningful feedback to the government so as to arrive at a dock management plan that's mutually acceptable and reasonable, and which takes into consideration the special circumstances that I believe arise in Pender Harbour and most of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. So that is my motion.
So Director Lee, just before I look for a seconder, did you want to change that first date from December 15th because it's already been changed?
Ooh, it'll have to be changed to that latest date, January 12th, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have a seconder for that. Thank you. Directors, any questions or discussion of the motion? Director Inkster?
Yeah, I'm hearing that people are, this is their first sight of this, and so I'm open to looking at that consideration to give the public more time. I do see in the motion, though, mutual, the words mutual agreement or acceptance. We always hope when government decisions are made that that's where we end up. So I'm hoping that that might be aspirational, but I'm okay to give the public some more time to put in some comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from directors before I call the question? No? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I did say that I was going to cut off questions at 3 o'clock, and it's now 3:05. So I want to thank our delegation for being here today. I want to thank everybody that came. Even if we didn't get to your questions, you are more than welcome to submit that feedback to the government's website. And yeah, safe travels today. We're going to take just a 10-minute recess before we resume. And welcome back, everybody, to the special board meeting of Thursday, November 30th, 2023. Just before we resume, I did want to point out that Director Inkster had to leave, and alternate Director McLaughlin has joined us in his place. She's not going to be on the Zoom meeting, but she is here in the meeting with us, and welcome, Director McLaughlin. So next up on our agenda is the Lower Crown Raw Water Reservoir Project update, and we have a presentation from Jasmine Paul. So we will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair. It's such a pleasure to be back today to meet with the board again to talk about the raw water reservoir and the collaborative work that we have been doing over the last year. So we have some important updates. I'm here with my colleague, Daniel from JDS Mining, and we are excited to provide this update. Other colleagues from the Sishak Nation unfortunately had to depart, but I am here with my colleagues, Quash, Stephen Fezchuk, the Stewardship and Territorial Land Management Divisional Manager, Debbie Hensby, and Nicole Lizinski. So thank you for your time today. We know your time is precious, so we are going to jump right in. So the Lower Crown Reservoir is also a water security project, and we're here today to talk about the feasibility study that we've undertaken in the last 10 months. This is a collaborative project between the Sishak Nation and the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and we will be having a press release later today, a joint press release that we're excited about. Water is an important issue, water security for all residents on the Sunshine Coast, and this is one opportunity, a great opportunity in order to address the water challenges we have seen over the last number of years. So the Sishak Nation, the Sunshine Coast Regional District, the town of Gibsons, and the District of Sechelt have been working in partnership over the last number of months through a series of water summits to look at water security on the Sunshine Coast. And we have developed collaboratively a shared vision and values of how we will work together around water security on the Sunshine Coast. It's important to every one of our citizens and every one of our constituents, and we want to make sure that in the future, there is greater water security on the coast. And as you can see here, I've just clipped out a small portion of that shared vision that will be a part of the press release later today that speaks to this, that our collective goal is to create a vibrant neighborhoods and economies while taking a multi-generational approach to protecting watersheds and other natural resources for future generations. This work, of course, comes along also with substantive work between our two governments, and we have brought our governments together through a memorandum of understanding that was signed earlier this year to further the investigations around the Lower Crown Reservoir and other water security projects. As a part of this deep collaborative work that we have been doing over the last almost a year now, we did take some time to consider the shared values for planning around water security. And we came up with really 3 great values. One is collaboration, another is sustainability, protection, resiliency, and respect for nature. And another is reconciliation, upholding the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and recognizing title and rights. These are our critical pillars in the substantive work that we are going to do together over the coming years and generations likely. Water security is not just a short-term need, but a long-term need for all those living on the Sunshine Coast. And the reservoirs are one important opportunity, but we have many others to address water security, including decreasing the amount of water that we use and conserving and being more sustainable in the way in which we use our water. But this work together can fundamentally transform our communities in ways that provides for greater stability and security, and that's what we're focusing on today. And what we're here to talk about is the feasibility study. So these projects are large projects that are certainly require diligence, which is why we have the incredible expertise from JDS Mining, but also the incredible professionals at the Sunshine Coast Regional District who we've been collaborating with over the last year in the design of this reservoir and other water security measures. So we're excited to provide that update for you today. We'll get into a little bit of technical information, and Daniel will help with that. But certainly, it's important to understand that this comes through a deep intergovernmental relationship that is seeking to address the needs of all of our citizens. So it's important to remember that for the majority of the Lower Sunshine Coast, as the board knows, that for anyone online or in the room who isn't as familiar, that most of our water, actually 76%, comes from the Chapman water system. And certainly over the last number of years, everybody understands that we've had some significant water challenges. And in 2022, it was very significant in that we were looking at very real measures of bringing in water and other things to address the water shortage. And our summers are getting longer. The drier months are getting longer. And in 2022, that went all the way into December, with a state of emergency being called by the Sunshine Coast Regional District and the Sishak Nation. And over the last 12 years, 7 of those years, we have had to call stage 4 water restrictions, very severe restrictions. And I know that we have some of the most rigorous restrictions in the province. So this measure, this Lower Crown Water Security Project, is one effort that we are making to address that substantive challenge and address the deficit that is ongoing. The Sunshine Coast Regional District has been doing some good work to better understand the deficit that we have in water. We did some work in the feasibility study as well around that. I'm not going to talk about that today, specifically because we know that there's a deficit, and that's the real challenge, is that we need to fill the deficit, and this project can substantively do that in a collaborative and thoughtful way. I will also just remind folks that this is could be one of its kind. We could be leading the way across the country in terms of what is possible between an Indigenous governing body, a local government, and industry in building a water security project for the benefit of all. So we're really quite excited about this opportunity. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague Daniel to talk about some of the specifics and more technical details.
Thanks, Jasmine. It's my pleasure to be here today and talk to this project. My name is Daniel Jenkins. I'm a professional engineer and the project manager consultant on behalf of Sishal Nation, project manager for the scoping study and the feasibility study for the water security project, including the Lower Crown proposed raw water reservoir. And so I'd like to walk through a few of the technical details today, and starting with some of the background work that we did in the feasibility study, looking at historical climate trends and building on a lot of the previous work done by the SRDs will perform and why the reservoir is needed. And so initially we looked at historical climate trends. We hired a specialist consultant to do this work for the feasibility study. They did an assessment of historical records and it showed that there's a significant decreasing trend in precipitation between July and September. That's in the baseline data for the last 60 years. There's also an increasing trend in temperature, which impacts snowpack development and summer evaporation, which impacts the Chapman water system supply. You can see on the graph on the left, that's the July to September precipitation in Sechelt, showing a downward trend in the last 60 years. And on the right-hand side, the increases in both maximum, minimum, and average daily temperatures in Sechelt. So this frames the climate trends that we are seeing that affect the Chapman water system and the water available for discharge for water treatment plant use and potentially for reservoir use. Then we looked also at the Chapman Creek flows themselves, obviously the climate being a main input into that. Chapman Creek is the primary source of water for the Chapman water system, but it's also habitat for aquatic life upstream and downstream of the intake. There's a specified minimum flow rate of 0.2 cubic meters per second. That's referred to as the environmental flow need, and that must be maintained in Chapman Creek to support aquatic life. You can see that in the chart on the bottom, the annual minimum 30-day rolling average, so the 30 days of any given year where Chapman Creek is at its lowest, it's actually trending towards that 0.2. So we are seeing in current years, and the trend is that we're actually just very close to that environmental flow need at baseline in the minimum times in the summer. And you can also see on the top the average Chapman Creek stream flow in July, September, also showing a downward trend. And in summary, the assessment of the historical stream flow data shows that there's a significant decrease between May and September flows. As part of the feasibility study work and engineering that was undertaken, the objectives for this work were to complete the feasibility level design and stability modeling for the Lower Crown Reservoir, developing a preliminary layout and process design criteria for the filtration plant. And that's required at the Heidelberg mine site, as the use of these raw water reservoirs for reservoirs would be a change in the mine's use of the mined out pits, where the baseline use for the mined out pits is for them to store waste, which is what is currently being done at that site. In addition, developing preliminary layouts and conducting preliminary stability analyses for the waterline, raw water reservoir, and the fine filter storage facility. And so Lower Crown being the first proposed reservoir and Waterline being the second proposed reservoir. Developing a municipal water demand forecast for the Chapman water system. And then assessing the local climate, Chapman Creek and Chapman watershed, and the operation of the reservoirs under both baseline and climate change impacted conditions. Developing a schedule and execution plan for the project, and then updating cost estimates for all components of the project. So with that, and building upon the work that was done in collaboration with the SCRD during the scoping study, the two reservoirs that were advanced in the feasibility study were the proposed Lower Crown and Waterline reservoirs shown here on the figure. And so the Lower Crown Reservoir is currently being mined out by Heidelberg at the site. It's an existing sand and gravel quarry pit, and the Waterline Reservoir is in a proposed sand and gravel pit that is yet to be started. So with that, Lower Crown is available almost immediately for use and has a usable storage capacity of around 900,000 cubic meters, which could be increased to up to 1 million cubic meters if an emergency spillway is built, allowing a higher water level to be maintained in that facility. And there would be no additional facilities needed to tie into the existing Chapman water treatment plant. It would be proposed to use the same intake that is currently being used for water treatment plant water. And then the second reservoir, which would be available for use in about 5-6 years' time, is the Waterline Reservoir, which would have a usable storage capacity of up to 1.8 million cubic meters. And additional facilities would be required to make this second reservoir feasible, including a dry stack facility for the mine. And additionally, it's anticipated that water treatment plant expansion will occur around that time as well, which would allow the water treatment plant to fully use the capacity of that Waterline Reservoir bringing online. And here's just a 3D image of the proposed Lower Crown reservoirs from a different angle, so you can kind of see where it's sited there in the mine and next to the town.
Great, thank you, Daniel, for that those presentations. So certainly our focus right now is on the Lower Crown Reservoir, and initially when we started this work some months ago, right after the real crisis in 2022, our ambition was to have the Lower Crown Reservoir up and running for 2024. Unfortunately, given the challenges in terms of funding and sort of moving this along, that won't be possible, but we are moving as quickly as possible to provide and have a reservoir up and running in 2025. This requires good and collaborative work between a number of parties. As I said, it is a partnership between Sishak Nation and the Sunshine Coast Regional District. Sishak Nation is the owner of the land through the Cinco Development Corporation under Queequeg Holdings. And the idea is that we would lease the land and the operations to the regional district, and the regional district would then operate the facility as experts in providing water and being just adjacent to the water treatment plant. There's a whole bunch of reasons that makes good sense. And so, as I said earlier, we've been working in collaboration with your staff who have deep expertise in this area for quite a number of months to make sure that anything we are proposing is in such a way that it meets their needs. This operation, as Daniel was speaking to, is within the Heidelberg mine site, so it also requires support from Heidelberg, and our focus again is on the Lower Crown Reservoir, which is immediately available, which is what we need on the Sunshine Coast. We need an option that provides long-term raw water storage in the very near future if we are to move ourselves into a more secure place, and that's the big goal here. Of course, along with these incredible partners, we are working with the District of Sechelt and the town of Gibsons, with our MLA and our MP. There will be a lot of people who are needed and parties who are needed in order to solve this situation. And so we're looking for our colleagues and partners in the federal and provincial government to help us to move this along. Permitting. One of the important parts, and we've been talking about permitting, is to ensure that we have the right permits in place. Luckily, one of the incredibly unique aspects of this project is that it is within an existing industrial site. So it's a key benefit to the project in that there will be no new environmental impacts. This is a brownfield site, not a greenfield site. And so we will not be further infringing on the environment. That also allows us to move permitting significantly faster. So it allows us to work with Heidelberg to update the mine plan and remove this from under the mine permit. So that is one critical permit we will need to work with Energy and Mines on. We will also need to update the water license. We'll, of course, have to do this in collaboration with the Sunshine Coast Regional District, who holds water licenses currently on Chapman Creek. We can do that and bring water into the facility. That will also allow us to ensure that we are protecting that water source, because the Regional District, as they do now, will be ensuring that the accurate amount of water comes out and the accurate amount of water flows down the creek. It is a really efficient and thoughtful system if we are to do it that way. We also, of course, need to work with the Vancouver Coastal Health to ensure that we are meeting all of their requirements around permitting of a water facility, and we are excited to work with them. The Regional District also has building permits, and we will, of course, need to work with our partners at the Regional District through that permitting process. I will just emphasize that because this is a brownfield site, the permitting process is significantly faster. If we were to go through a greenfield site, more than likely it would require a full-scale environmental assessment at the provincial level and perhaps even at the federal level. And those are incredibly important processes, just broadly in terms of the governance of the province. However, they do take quite a lot of time, and we don't have a lot of time. We need quick and thoughtful solutions. And so using a brownfield site is one of the ways that we can do that. So next steps. Of course, with many things, and in particular large industrial projects, we need funding. And so we have been working collaboratively for some months to find that funding. Luckily, our federal partners had an application process open, the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, through Infrastructure Canada. And collaboratively, the Sunshine Coast Regional District and the Sishak Nation applied for funding from DMAF in July of this year. And we are waiting to hear back, and we're very, very hopeful that they will see this as a good project to fund. Because it is so unique. It's, using a reclaimed mine site. It's a partnership between an Indigenous governing body and the local government, and working in collaboration with industry. So we're waiting to hear back, but as everyone knows, these funding sources take some time to make their decision. In addition to that, through conversations with Minister Bowen Ma and others at the provincial level, we also applied to the Union of BC Municipalities for pre-construction phase funding, and we are very hopeful that that will come through soon so we can really kickstart the work in a very substantive way with the regional district. And so we're waiting to hear back from that quite soon. In addition to that, the Sishak Nation went directly to the province in the hopes of funding the construction of the Lower Crown Reservoir as quickly as possible. This is a key focus of the Sishak Nation Council and has been very clear over the last year that water security is essential for their members, and they want to do what they can to support all residents on the Sunshine Coast. And so proposing this is one way in which they can help to better the broader community. And so we're very hopeful in engaging directly with our federal and provincial colleagues in the hopes of getting funding for this collaborative project and moving forward so that we can find a better path for our residents and better security. So in terms of next steps, there is a whole bunch, and they're not all listed on this slide for sure. This is a big project with lots of moving parts. The main piece of work that we need to do is at this time ensure that we have the funding available, and then immediately go to the long-term procurement needs. So we have geosynthetic materials, liners that we'll need to put in place, pumps that we'll need to put in place, and for all of, I know, everyone working in this field, some of these things take a long time to arrive. So we need to get those in place and get a contractor as well. Of course, there's critical intergovernmental work that we need to continue to do to put all of the pieces in place, the governing documents in place, and we will do that with both the Sunshine Coast Regional District and with Heidelberg. We'll need to undertake some initial environmental assessments on the land. These are sort of certainly not at the federal or provincial scale, but would be undertaken quite quickly. And then submit the permits because those can take some time, and we want to make sure that we are beginning the process with our provincial and regional district colleagues to make sure that we're addressing any concerns as quickly as possible so that permitting can move in an expedited fashion. Our goal, of course, is upon funding is to start construction immediately and move our way along so that in the near future, and ideally in 2025, the reservoir would be up and running and we would be able to provide additional water security to residents on the Sunshine Coast. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today, and I really thank the board for having us again to speak to you about this important project, and looking forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. Directors, any questions for our delegation? Director Bax?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I really look forward to working together with the Sishal Nation on this project. It's really unfortunate that we haven't heard back from the province yet, or the federal government. And I wonder if this assessment project, or the money that the SCRD is putting up today, is that going to have any impact on the the approval of our grants. I mean, I've heard that sometimes if you start work on something and that can interfere with the approval process of the grant. I wonder if that's a thing. Is there a way that we can put, like you get pre-approved for a mortgage, can we put that money into place saying to the federal and provincial governments that we're ready to put up that money should you give us the money? Because I don't see that we're able to do this project without their deep help.
Thank you for the question, Director Bax. Yes, certainly my understanding, and I haven't spoken to Dean about this, but my understanding is that the funding that's being made available isn't directly to the a lot of the costs that we put into the grant application. Certainly to Infrastructure Canada, largely what we're looking for is, funding for the liners and the pumps and all of those kinds of things. And what we're hoping initially is to really start the intergovernmental work. So I don't see it as interfering with either DMAF or the UBCM application. In particular, the UBCM application was to ensure that we could do those long lead items as quickly as possible and securing the necessary materials and contractors. So I don't think that there is a concern there, but I will certainly follow up with Dean to make sure. Thank you.
Not that we're at the staff report yet, Director Bax. We're not at the staff report yet, but thank you for your question. So, Director Stanford.
One of the things when I look at this proposal is where does Heidelberg fit into this as an organization or a corporation? Is there going to be a benefit to them? Is that something that we have to look at within our feasibility studies, expenses to cover the costs for Heidelberg? Like, where is their interest in this?
Yeah, I can certainly say that, Sishach Nation and Heidelberg have a very good and deep relationship. We've been working together for a number of decades now, and they understand the importance of this project to the Sunshine Coast and to Sishach Nation members. Addressing water security, as I said, is a critical objective of the Sishach Nation Council, and they are supportive of doing that. Now, we are working together to make sure that everything that we do doesn't impact the operations of the facility, because we also have an ongoing partnership with Heidelberg around their mining operations. And certainly when we get to Waterline, there is much more to figure out. Right now, focusing on Lower Crown, this is something that we understand we can work together on, and we're looking forward to that. And any other concerns will be addressed as we move forward.
Thank you. I've got one question, which I think I know the answer to, but we've got VCH as an approving partner as part of this process. So I know that there have been some concerns raised about the proximity to the landfill and to the biosolids project at the mine site. I'm hoping you could share how that potential impact has been measured or considered or mitigated through this. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly. And I'll turn to Daniel for the sort of engineering answer to this, but that is to say that, of course, we have certainly taken this into consideration. The geology really helps us out in this situation. We have spoken to VCH, and they raised those exact concerns, and we were pleased to hear that. Frankly, we want our water to be secure. That's important to all of us, right? Nobody wants to question the water that comes out of their pipes. And so we are going to work with them to answer all of their questions. But certainly based on the location of the facility, we don't have any concerns about those two, but we will be working with VCH on this. But maybe I'll just ask Daniel to add to that.
I don't really have much more to add to that other than location is key for these two. They're on kind of the other side of the mine site, and as Jasmine mentioned, with the materials itself, it's quite it's a inert material, sand and gravel, and so you don't kind of see some of the concerns that you would have at other mine sites around the province or around the world in that aspect. So using these pits for water storage, particularly in front of the water treatment plant, there's little concern at this stage, and will continue to be looked at through the final engineering process.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Thank you. There was a brief mention of the potential of an emergency spillway. I think I got that right. I have not heard of that particular structure before in this potential plan. Can I just get a few more details and what thought is being put into the idea that this is a very populated area close to the ocean? So that is one of the things I would be looking at is what does that mean?
Yeah, and fair enough. So that was an addition. We've been, the engineers at JDS Mining have very deep experience all over the world in building these kinds of facilities. We have to also remember that this pit was actually built for this purpose. It was built for holding water. There are all kinds of these kinds of pits all over the place, and they're, they're designed in order to hold water in this way. So we know that it's safe, and it's not a dam. It's literally a very large hole in the ground. And for those of us who've flown over it, it's quite impressive. The photos don't do it justice, but it is literally a hole in the ground. So that does make it significantly safer. The spillway is one way that our engineers found in order to optimize the facility and increase the water storage. It's not something we're intending on doing immediately because it will take more time to permit, because we will need to work with our colleagues in the federal government, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in particular, to move the water out of the facility and then down into the marine environment. But it's one option, and what it would mean is literally an opportunity to, in the very extreme flood events, to move the additional water out of the Lower Crown Reservoir and down sort of in a pipe, either through down Chapman or through the mine site into the marine environment. But it's yet to be determined. It's an option that needs more investigation. I don't know, Daniel, if you have anything to add.
Just that at baseline, the operating plan for the facility would be to maintain the water level quite a bit below the rim of the facility. And so that would allow the probable maximum flood, which is a fancy engineering term for the maximum amount of water that could be envisioned to ever enter that facility based on the catchment, many, many times bigger than, for instance, the flood that the Fraser Valley saw a few years ago. And you could take that amount of water in the facility and not overflow it. And so that's kind of the base plan, is to operate it at a water level that you can still accommodate that probable maximum flood. And then in future years, if you did build a spillway, and of course the siting, the discharge, all of that would have to be discussed, looked at, permitted, then you could potentially raise the water level and add about an extra 100,000 cubic meters of available storage to the facility. So it's a more longer term option.
Thank you. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I'm not sure if this is for the delegation or staff, so please field it for me. Awesome project. I think, I speak for myself. So I'd love to see that come to fruition. We've always seen this project kind of hand in hand with funding from the federal government and now provincial government potentially. So it's hard to separate the two, and I hate to ask that question, but what happens if if the funding, we're still waiting to hear back? What is the contingency plan? Should the funding not be available? Is there more funding that could be acquired? Just trying to see yeah.
I can just say, I know that, the circumstances that the Sunshine Coast is dealing with, initially, we were the first ones, right? We were really at the leading edge of the challenge around climate change, unfortunately, and water security. But this year, we saw that change drastically, right? Throughout the province, and even until November, many areas of the province were in stage 5 drought. This is a drastic change in the ways in which we've managed water throughout the province. So I think that we are the first, unfortunately, may give us an advantage in getting funding, but also my anticipation is that both the province and the federal government will need to make more funding available in the very near future to address these substantive challenges, because they are going to happen up and down the coast, and there is only so much that we can do in conservation. We need to work hard on that, and we need to address our leaks, and we need to decrease the use of water, and many places, like on the Sunshine Coast, we will need new water security projects. So I do anticipate that more funding will be available. If it doesn't come through in the time period that we want it to, it will come through, and that we are together, and that we are such a strong partnership. I think that gives us a very significant leg up on projects across the province.
Director McMahon.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up on Director Gabius's question. So if the funders say no, does the project stop? What do we do?
I think it's a very good question, Director. I think right now we need to put our energy into getting these grants and being very clear to our partners in the federal and provincial government that we are together and that this is a good way for us to address the needs of our citizens. And then we'll have to reevaluate. We are working on a whole number of other projects together, and the regional district did, for example, bring on a new facility this year in Church Road. That's a good contribution. We have other work to do around, decreasing leaks and things like that. But we do need help. We can't do this alone. The projects are so big that our federal and provincial colleagues will need to step up and help us to solve this situation. And I know that CICHAQ Council made that request to a number of provincial ministers, and I understand the regional district did as well over the last number of months. So there's a lot of work being put together between the two governments to address this issue, understanding that it is so important to all residents.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up for questions for our presenters. Directors, can I have a motion to receive the presentation materials, please? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And so with that, thank you to both of you for being here today. And we're going to move on to the staff report, which is Annex A. Oh, Director McMahon, my apologies.
Yes, I was hoping we could get a copy of those slides. Good slides. Scary, but good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So next up, we're going to Annex A in our agenda package, which is the staff report to correspond with this. And so we'll turn this over to GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview of some of the financial and operational implications of this project. As you can imagine, this project was not on our work plan. We were not anticipating when we were preparing a work plan for this year that this project would be there. We're more than happy to work on the project. However, there will be implications on the financial and organizational level for us to actually make the time available to work on this project. My apologies. So what we're proposing is to there's currently a budget approved for a project that's called long-term water supply sources. The intent of the project was to explore other long-term water supply sources like Low Home, like Granny River, like Saginaw Lake, and see if one of those sources could be developed as a future long-term water supply source. The proposal is currently to use some of that funding that is already approved by the board for the purpose of spending staff time and legal and consultant fees in support of this initial phase of the project, as well as to bring back a budget proposal to next year's budget process to actually complete the original scope of that long-term feasibility study work in 2025 and 2026. The report also outlines that we are currently in the midst of our budget process, and we have all kind of other contractual and legal obligations to meet by the end of the year. So the first we can really assign staff to work on this file and to review the large stack of information we received from the nation is in January. And we expect that it will take at least about 3 months before we can actually have a good review and had some meaningful discussion with the nation on the and their consultants on the technical side of the house. A large component of that is review of the technical information to see if it actually works for us to operate it. And we had, as the delegation just confirmed, we had some conversations with Vancouver Coastal Health yesterday, and they also raised some additional concerns about water quality that still need to be addressed. So there's work to do, and we would like to do the work, and however, there will be an impact on other projects. And the project, we have not clearly defined yet which projects might be impacted, and the report just outlined some of the projects that could be impacted if we divert, reassign staff to work on this file. And staff are here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Rosenboom. Director Bax.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's already been budgeted. I was wondering, when would should this proposal be adopted by us today? When will the work begin? And I do have concerns over the second item, bullet point on page 3, the assessment of the long-term solid waste options. Should any of the other parts of that bullet point on the bottom of page 3 be set aside because of the adoption of this particular project? I really have issues with setting aside the assessment of the long-term solid waste. The question is, when will this work begin? And GM Rosenboom said something along the lines of 3 months.
January 2024, they would be able to start that, based on what I read here.
Anyway, I just wanted to express my concerns over putting aside that particular part of this list that was generated.
GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. Yeah, I can indeed confirm that in the sentence, 2 sentences above that, the list of projects, the January 2024 date is listed as for us to actually start the review of this work. This, the last sentence prior to the list also indicate that this is not a final list, it's a list of projects that can be impacted. And why the landfill, long-term solid waste project is on here is because this project will require because of its nature, a lot of time also from senior staff. For myself, from the CFO, as well as from the CEO. And those are also the people that are also involved in work like on the landfill, or like there's only so much we can do. So it's really about prioritizing work. So it doesn't mean that there's no work happening on any of those files. Some we might just have to delay for half a year or 3/4 year to even commence it. But another, it might just go slower than what has been anticipated. And the ultimate impact will also, of course, depend on what might be approved in terms of projects as part of the 2024 budget process that will kickstart next week.
Thank you.
So, and I can, the list includes some, for example, the Langwell wastewater treatment plant. We have a grant for that. So that will have an impact on meeting grant timelines as well. But we only have so much operational staff and engineering staff that we can can redivert almost to work on this project in such a short time. So it will be a challenge. We can do it, but it will have implications.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, from a board perspective, I would really appreciate some clarity on what decision points are coming up. Like, what decisions are we going to need to make, and where in the process do those decisions come? Because there's a lot going on here, and it's complicated. I don't believe we've actually voted on this, but already we're, waist deep in it. And so perhaps at a future meeting, we could get some clarity about what this process is going to look like for us and when we make decisions, when we say yes or no, and what we're saying yes or no about. So just to really get some additional clarity going forward. We have a lot of balls in the air here, and many of them are quite urgent. The landfill is urgent. The Hopkins water system is limping along. The Langdale wastewater treatment plant quit limping some time ago. So it's pretty challenging. So that's a suggestion. I have not formulated a motion, but I'd like to put it out there. Thank you.
But I hear a question, and I might be able to provide some answer to that question about next steps. One of the major things that we need to analyze is the operational cost and the future replacement cost, because the asset management cost will also be for the SRD to take care of. So the construction cost is proposed to be primarily supported by a senior government level funding, and then all the operational costs and the asset replacement cost will be for the SRD to maintain. Some of the infrastructure will have a lifespan of 20 years, 25 years, and we're talking about liners, we're talking about pumps, and those are significant costs that we would have to consider. So and as well as on the operational side, we're talking here about a reservoir that's below the treatment plant. So we have to pump the water up, we have to treat the water, and one of the items of discussion yesterday with Vancouver Coast Health was also the fact that if the water is let into the reservoir in the spring and sits there for several months, there's a significant chance of algae growth. And so there might be, because it's stagnant water, and you might have birds using it and algae growing in it. So we need to take care of, from an engineering perspective, that might require adjustment, but also from a treatment perspective, we need to make sure that we can actually treat that water. Most likely we can, but there will be a higher operational cost to do that, because instead of clear water, we now have to use extra chemicals and extra staff time to actually treat it, and there will be extra waste water generated and solid waste generated by the treatment plant as a result of it. So in terms of decisions, there will need to be agreements arranged for with the nation, including on the land. It wasn't mentioned, but the idea is that we were going to lease the land from the nation. So there will be a lease agreement, there will be operational agreements. Those will have to be approved by the board ultimately. And we're going to work on a financial analysis of what is actually going to be the result, for the impact on the taxpayer, short-term and long-term, of this kind of project. And how does it compare to other projects that we're currently working on?
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Yeah, I have similar concerns. I think the implications of how long we would be delayed on some of these projects. I think the solid waste, I don't know how much longer we can realistically delay. It's a huge project. It's one of our critical services. I can't imagine having to go back to the YMCA neighborhood and tell them that they're going to continue to bubble along with their current system. There's just, I don't quite understand the implications or the timelines, but I also see that some of the things that may come off are things that actually help this feasibility study, including a comparison of how does this fit in terms of costs and realistic operations for other scenarios for diversifying our water and making our water sources more resilient. So it's really concerning to see some of the items on that list. And Hopkins Landing water, I'm going to see tomorrow and see exactly what kind of condition it's in. So thanks. It's more a comment as much as anything.
Thank you. All right, Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Question to staff. So we were just told by the delegation that, so summer 2024 is no longer a realistic ETA, which is understandable. We also don't know whether or not the funding will come our way. We're hoping to get it, but we don't know. So I'm wondering why this needs to happen right now. Like, because like, yes, I'm also concerned, I'm looking at this list of projects that, I see some that have been delayed and that I'm getting asked about, and I'm like, ugh. So why now? Would it be possible to wait until the funding is secured, or, is there, like, my question is like, why does it have to be right now? Why the urgency?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say the primary reason why staff are proposing to start this work in Q1 to do this work next year, start this work next year, is to allow the board to make the decision: is this what we want or not? What are the operational costs? What are the technical implications? What are the risks? What are the liabilities we take on? Without having the fact that it is delayed until 2025 in terms of completion and construction completion, might not mean that even the construction will still need to start late next year at the latest. So yes, there's a little bit of extra window, but there is not that much window available, especially given lead times as the delegation was just talking about. So from our perspective, this delay allows at least the SRD to do the comparison and to make sure that if the SRD says yes, it's actually in the taxpayer's interest to say yes, instead of that we almost don't have the time to even do that thinking to make a thoughtful decision. So I'm concerned about the impacts as well on other projects. I didn't list these ones easily. I listed them because they are all not directly related to expanding our water supply. I could have listed Langdale or Eastbourne, but then we would have had water supply, otherwise, development of other water supply sources delayed. So it needs to come from somewhere. So that's why there is, unfortunately, several wastewater treatment plants here on the list. Realizing, but at the same time, also realize that that's not favorable for those plants and for those particular taxpayers.
Thank you, GM Rosenboom. And I just wanted to follow up on that because grant timing can be a tricky thing. And I wonder if our CAO might have any comments on when we might hear back about grants.
It's difficult to predict exactly when we'd hear back. I think it would be optimistic to expect to hear back on either the DMAF application or the application of the province to the actual grant program before end of May or end of March at the earliest. Could be later. And then even then, sometimes you get preliminary indications, but there's nothing you can say anyway. So I think end of March would be optimistic based on past track records of processing times and announcements.
Right, and what you were getting at with the announcements was that they're sometimes embargoed so that we can't tell anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, GM Rosenboom?
Yeah, maybe one thing to add is that the delegation mentioned that there was a request made to the province for the funding of Lower Crown, and as part of that funding application, they included some funds for the SRD for this work. So if that would be received, that could offset the 100,000 that is currently proposed to be invested in this project.
Thank you. Director Stanford?
I guess I did have a question. My comment previously was, I'm not sure how long these are going to be delayed. Like, are we talking a quarter? Are we talking a year? I'm not really sure. what the impact would be. It changes how I think of this.
Thank you. I think the answer to that question will primarily depend on what happens after March. Is it a go? Then we need to start, even though the construction is undertaken by the nation, we would have to be heavily involved, and we would be the ones that have to do the commissioning and start the operation. So our engineering department and operational department, utility services, will be heavily involved in the project anyway. And at the same time, we are still doing then final design of Langdale potentially and that kind of stuff. So which project is how much delayed? I don't have the work plan yet for next year. So I'm happy to provide an update to the board when I have it, when we have that in place. And that part also depends on what is approved as part of the budget process in terms of staffing positions as well as projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
If I am remembering all this correctly, the provincial application is for Lower Crown. The federal application is for both Lower Crown and the larger reservoir. If we get the money, are we committed to one or both reservoirs? Who's committed?
If we get the money, we're still not committed, although we have an opportunity to continue to work together towards implementing one or both projects. You're correct. The DMAF application included applications for both Lower Crown and Waterline. It's a large application. I think it's around the $130 million mark. Subsequent to that, Shell Nation approached the province separately to see if they would provide the funding separately for Lower Crown only to expedite its completion. Subsequent to that conversation, the province identified to Shell that there was a program eligible for funding that they could apply to with a very short turnaround that had a cap of about $5 million they could request. And they wanted to ensure that the projects were applying to all available grant programs before approaching the province separately, which is what resulted in the $5 million request to the province for funding assistance for Lower Crown only. And they've still requested the additional funding for Lower Crown directly from the province on the side of both of those applications. And we await any decisions on any of those. But in the meantime, we'll continue working towards resolving the types of issues and questions that need to be answered to come back to you for a decision should we be fortunate enough to get some of the funding.
Thank you. Director Bax?
So am I to understand that there's two provincial grant applications in a federal grant application and that this feasibility study is not covered by any of them?
I believe it was expressed that the feasibility funds might be recoverable from one of the provincial grants.
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
Partially recoverable from one, potentially.
Excellent, good. I just wanted to commend the staff for the work that they're doing on our water project, and I just wanted to let the public know that they're going to have a really robust and sustainable system in 10 years' time compared to 10 years ago. And but it costs money.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. The projects that we're proposing could potentially be delayed to provide staffing to do this new one, those were funded by previous years, so we're not talking an impact on 2024 taxation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
My second question is, from looking at the previous grants that were applied for, it looks to me like we're looking for partial funding to get started before we actually have secured all the grants, which then would put us at risk of ending up having to expense if we didn't go forward with the project. Have I got that part right?
Thank you for the question. I think it should be made clear that all the funding applications have been made by the Sechelt Nation. So they are the ones that will construct, and the funding is for the construction, development and construction of the reservoir. So there's currently no hidden liability for the SRD from that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon. Oh, sorry, C8.
Apologies, yeah, just minor point of clarification. I think technically on the DMAF application, the Sunshine Coast Regional District is a partnered applicant. The rest of the answer remains true.
Thank you, CAO. Director McMahon.
Yes, I think it's time to actually make a motion, since we're already discussing it. So, yeah, this is the due diligence that we need to do. So I'm going to move the staff recommendations on page 2.
Thank you. And I've got seconders for that. Are there any other questions or comments from directors? This is voting A, B, D, E, F, and District of Sechelt. I don't see any hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, GM Rosenboom. All right. We have no reports. We have no communications or motions or new business. We do have an in-camera session. So I'd look for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 90, subsection 1K of the Community Charter. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Now we'll take questions from the public before we go in camera. I just need you to come up to the microphone, though, because there are people online who won't be able to hear you.
Closer, sure, yeah. Okay, so I suppose I'm a little surprised. I've been here since 1 o'clock and listened to everyone's opinions. And I'm sorry the panel left here because I felt I had a question for them. But it sounds like when it comes to this, this reservoir, that the train has left the station, but the ducks are not in a row, two metaphors, right? I was very interested by the staff's comments and the feeling that their role is to give a thoughtful and confident response to local taxpayers about this project. But there seem to be an awful lot of unanswered questions. And the one that I came with today specifically relates to the letter that appeared in the local newspaper, September 29th, relating to the biosolids that were spread on land, on Lehigh Heidelberg land, starting in 1998. I've gathered from the website of the company Silvix that worked on this project that thousands of tons of biosolids were spread on their land, on Lehigh's land, for the very good reason that the ponds in which the sediment that collected from washing gravel had no nutritional value. So they had a great idea and they thought they'd grow trees on it. Sounds fantastic. But I would have liked to have known from the panel, I'd like to have seen on the overhead shots they had, where exactly these biosolids are located. And I would have liked to have heard from the panel something more reassuring than we're lucky it's a brownfield site, otherwise they'd need a full-scale environmental assessment for a greenfield site. In other words, no one addressed the biosolid issue, which I'm sure everyone read in the letter to the editor. And it's factually correct that there were thousands of tons of biosolids deposited on Lehigh's property. So I came with the answer, where were they laid in relation to where this reservoir is going to be? I mean, that's a nice clean hole in the ground, just sand and gravel, stick a liner in there, who cares, it's clean. But I'm concerned about any seepage from around that area that will get into the water. So I'd like to know if the staff...
Which is why I did ask the question while they were here, is because I know that
I'm sorry?
I did ask that question while they were here. It was tied to the landfill as well, because the landfill
Okay,
is.
did we get an answer? I didn't hear any answer about environmental assessments on that. I can tell you that from
Can I answer?
Please do.
Thank you. You've asked your question. GM Rosenboom, I saw your hand up.
Maybe I can clarify this. All the reference issues or potential concerns about biosolids, location of landfill, groundwater infiltration are on the radar of staff to assess and will be considered and will be considered in our assessments in the upcoming months and discussed with the nation. And we're also part of our discussion yesterday with Vancouver Coastal Health because they are aware of those same concerns as well.
Which Jasmine did speak to, that Vancouver Coastal Health raised the same questions. So the health authority needs to be made comfortable about that before anything happens. So any other questions? Councillor Shepherd.
Adam Shepherd, 6273 Seashell Inlet Road. I just have a question about the JDS study. It's an interesting situation that it's being authored by or paid for by the nation, which is their own authority. But once it's conveyed over to the region for study and vetting, does it become a public document? And I guess my underlying question is, when does that study be released to the public?
Good question. GM Rosenboom?
Good question to be answered.
Okay.
We don't know. We don't have the answer to the question yet. I think those are the kind of conversations that we still need to have about ownership of the documentation, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Joff, now your turn. If you see a green light, the microphone's on.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon. My name is Joff Bedford, and I'm a concerned taxpayer of Seashell. There's been a lot of discussion here this afternoon about the creative and an imaginative project at Heidelberg. And we're talking about $100 million for the pits and another $25 million for the addition to the treatment plant. So a total of $125 million. It'll probably be disruptive to the Heidelberg process as it is now. It's a big cost item at the SCRD, and apparently is increasing the stress levels at the SCRD to a significant level. Now imagine if all that can go away for $3 to $4 million. And what I'm talking about is developing the Dusty Road well.
Is there a question, Joff?
I'll put it in the form of a question. Will the SCRD test the Dusty Road well to confirm its original quality of water and either eliminate it from consideration as a water source or take the next step to develop it into a water source that would make the Heidelberg operation unnecessary? That's my question.
Thank you for the question. This has been addressed several times before. The board declined to move forward with the Dusty Road option. I don't remember exactly when most recently, but 2023 sometime. I don't know if GM Rosenboom or CAO McKinley have exact timelines of when we last discussed it.
I think the last discussion was with the last board in 2022. Earlier this year as well.
Which you wouldn't have been here for, GM
I wasn't
Rosenboom.
here. Earlier this year was discussed as well.
And it was also covered off in the Water Summit discussions as well.
Yeah.
And just a reminder on a different topic that it's 4:30, and that sound you didn't hear is the sound of us needing to pass a motion to extend the meeting.
Thank you. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that, CAO. So at this time, no, is the answer to the question. The board has not directed staff to look at Dusty Road again.
Can I make a comment on previous history of the Dusty Road well?
Real quick.
Okay, the Dusty Road well was eliminated from consideration for three reasons. One, it was an unconfined aquifer, on an unconfined aquifer. Two, a possible contamination from the mining operation. And the third reason was there's better sources elsewhere. A lot of these are false narratives, as far as I'm concerned. The large Abbotsford Mission Sumas aquifer is all an unconfined aquifer. There's many hundreds,
They're
probably
used all
thousands
over
of
the
wells
province.
there.
Yep.
So that first argument against Dusty Road should be eliminated.
We're not getting into a debate about the Dusty Road well at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Second item, could possibly be contaminated from the mining operation. That is against provincial law, so basically that cannot happen. And the third item, there's better sources elsewhere. I don't consider raw water reservoirs better sources. They're dirty water that have to be treated. Groundwater is clean water, which requires minimal treatment. The Dusty Road well, if developed, could probably produce 8 million liters a day. And in addition to that, we have 5 wells scheduled to be drilled in West Sechelt. So I think groundwater is the source, not these huge mega
Okay.
projects that burden the taxpayers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Connie, did you have any questions for us today? Okay, thank you. We're just going to take 5 minutes to reset the room. And welcome back to the special board meeting of Thursday, November 30th. That brings us to the end of our agenda, so I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, everybody.